is somehow important for this week because we talk about oil and politics in the Gulf. This is the political economy where we have the importance at this time, specifically when we talk about many countries in the Middle East, especially in the Gulf, who depends much on oil as for the main source of income, oil. So we will look at this in details in the next 20 to 25 minutes. Maximum could be half an hour. Then we're going to be opening the floor for questions. So you can take notes, questions. We can have discussions after you finish this seminar. So oil, it's important for the Gulf countries for many reasons, especially for the economic development for the past 5 decades. It is really important where lots of achievements have been done in terms of economic growth and dependency much on this source of income, where many countries of GCC countries especially become solely dependent on oil and oil revenue. Some of the countries become like a 90% or 80% dependence on oil revenue, which somehow affect the sustainability for the long term, and it affects the economic growth for the long term. For the past 5 decades and for now, things seem to be smooth, and the economic situation getting from good to excellent status. But again, like how long this can be sustained for, and what kind of political situation we will have, and how much impact this economic situation would have on a political situation, and what exactly we have in the Gulf. As I mentioned last week, the Gulf is not only GCC, Gulf 9 countries, including GCC 6 countries, Oman, Kuwait, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. These we call them GCC countries, but we do have Iran, Iraq, and Yemen. So the development, achieving development in any country depends much on the interactions of several factors such as social, political, and economic components. So in any country, in Turkey, in Oman, in Saudi Arabia, in Pakistan, in India, in any place, if you would like to achieve development in a country, you have to depend on combination of many factors, several factors such as social, political, and economic components. Any country cannot stand the situation if it is not able to feed. It's not able to feed its own people. You remember in 1990, we have the collapse of the Soviet Union, and mainly because of the economic situation, not because of the political or security situation, no. So basically, we have here, based on the positive correlation between development and democracy, we will look at development and democracy and sustainability in GCC countries in the Gulf, and how much has been this dependent on oil. The achievement to achieve a higher level of development, and that means we have to look at the achievement of democracy. Now, so many people would question the fact, do we have democracy in the Middle East or in the Gulf? What kind of democracy is this, and what is the meaning? What can suit one country in the world and not suit the other one? The United States has its own way of democracy. India has its own way. Turkey has its own. Every country have a way to define democracy because it says kind of a flexible and elastic definition of democracy. It is about the people itself and their own choice, the people, the choice of the people. But again, like everybody can say from different direction or different opinion, that maybe the Middle Eastern countries have no democracy. But what is the basis for this? Do we have to be copy-paste from the experience we have in Germany or the UK, France, or do we have to have a different ways for defining the achievements of political life, the best political standard? Now, we will look at this again at the end, but we have to focus now on the oil and the importance of oil because oil can help people to establish best economy, public service, paving the way for good political situation. So look at this slide is slide 3, Gulf Cooperation Council, GCC, and this is going to be next week the main focus as an institute. So for now, the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council, the countries of the Gulf Cooperation Council, 6 of them, witness an economic and social developments for the past 5 decades. How this happened, I give you an example. For example, Oman. In Oman in 1970s, Oman had almost nothing, almost the same thing if you look at many, almost the same for the Gulf countries 5 decades ago, 50 years, 60 years ago. No schools, no universities, no public services. The infrastructure was almost, there was nothing infrastructure. But today you talk about, we have one of the best infrastructure and economies, one of the best economies and social development. We will look at the social development as one of the main factors in political development. Social development, when you talk about the stability of the society, people able to coexist and work together, even though they have some differences in terms of ethnicity somehow and sectors. But we talk about social development, that everybody is belonging to the same community, eventually able to work together to achieve the best. Now, in many cases, we have surpassed some developed countries in the Gulf, and you can live and you can see the situation, that life could be much better than some European countries in terms of social activities, economic activities. So this is not a compliment, but I'm living in the Gulf and I know the situation well, that you can compare GCC countries to some European countries. You will find the level and the standard of living in GCC, in the Gulf, is higher and much better than some countries in Europe. Take an example of this could be the high rate of income per capita. The highest income per capita could be in Qatar. Same thing go for somehow for Kuwait, United Arab Emirates. Could be the lowest income per capita in GCC countries could be Bahrain and Oman. But the highest is Qatar. Could be after Qatar could be the United Arab Emirates and Kuwait. Saudi Arabia somehow is in the middle, but we have high rates of per capita income. If you look at health and education, we talk about the best equipments, best hospitals, best services in the Middle East. Now, some of the hospitals could having the best facilities. You might not have the best doctors, yes, but you could have the best facilities and the high rank of education. Some of the universities in the Gulf have been ranked as somehow the best in the Middle East and having high ranks at the international level. So how did we have such kind of health, education, and infrastructure and social services to become one of the best in the whole Middle East for the past 5 decades? Almost 5 decades ago, there was nothing. But when you build it from scratch, from zero, when you go up this building, you can find yourself today. We have the achievements. It's been high in economy, in social aspects, in education, in health. But again, the question is about the democracy and politics. We're going to have discussion on this, and you can have any question you want at any point. But again, some people question the term democracy. Do we have democracy in the Gulf, even though we have the best type of development for the past 5 decades in terms of economy? But the democracy is not. This is not the case. This is not the situation. But it's not the same. If you look between one country to another, it's not one package. It's not one package. In some countries like Saudi Arabia, it's more tight. It's more difficult than other countries because you have monarchy, and the monarchy, the family have the whole power. If you look at Kuwait, for example, it's a monarchy, but they have an election, and they have election for the Shura Council, for the Legislative Council. You have political parties. Those political parties who have diverse political parties who can have elections, and they can vote and run for the elections, and they have their own voices heard by the community. So the independent factor here is the oil. Go back again and look the social and in every aspect of life that you have. How can you measure the development? You have to look back at oil and gas. Today we have not only oil, but we do have oil and gas. For example, in Qatar, they depend on gas more than oil because they have a reserve of gas to be one of the highest in the world. So this is what makes a rich country. So the stability of the countries here has been observed for decades because of the independent variable, which is oil. But oil price is not fixed. We have a fluctuation. I mean, a fluctuation is meaning ups and down of the price of oil is not fixed for life. It depends on the political situation. It depends on the consumption. We will look at that kind of situation by the end of this later today. So oil is considered as determinant for development and democracy. Determinant, this is not the situation in many countries in the world, but oil has been in the Gulf as one of the points, as it is the main determinant point for the past few decades. The special nature of development we have seen in Gulf Cooperation Council states, where the oil has been the main variable, does not affect the political situation. What does it mean this? Meaning we have lots of development, we have advanced development, growth in the economy, in many aspects of life, but in terms of political structure, as you can see in the last point in this slide, the nature of political structure, has it been affected? This is a question mark as an inevitable result of development from oil. Now we do have some development, yes, but it's not the same pace, it's not the same speed we do have in terms of development in economy and in social aspects. Why? Because people think somehow, people who live in the Gulf think we are seeking stability, income, social service, employment. So it's not much about the type of political structure and development. It's about how much stability, security, and you find some of the stability and security, not all countries, but some of them, such as Oman, has one of the best stability and security in the world, not only in the Middle East. Meanwhile, now we have some countries who have been suffering for the past 5-6 years, such as Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Qatar, somehow. But it depends on the level, as we'll look at after a few minutes. So what is the role of oil in development? Oil has caused huge development in terms of economic growth, sustainable economic growth for the past 5 decades, and which one of the best in the world. 7-8 decades ago, there was no development. Everything was backward. And even 5 decades ago, today, if you look, we have achieved a lot. So you have the abundant nature resource return would enable better engagement in economic development, better economic development. Now, we still somehow, if you look at the last point in this slide, you see that what is observed from the experience of countries that are more dependent on natural resources, we will find that these countries are far from achieving the goals that lead to their role in development. What happens is kind of the opposite result. What I mean exactly, I'm going to explain it. The expectation that we have the money, we have the wealth, because we have the oil, and the oil is making us rich countries, but this would somehow, in a normal situation, incite people to work and develop. With this, usually, supposedly, that would encourage the states and the administrations to work towards achieving long and sustainable economy. Long and sustainable. What I mean, long and sustainable economy if the oil and gas run out and no oil and gas anymore? Then what is going to be the next? That is a question mark. Now, usually, oil and gas would help those countries to build the infrastructure, to build a good economy, sustainable economy for the long term. But the fact is, it has not. It has not. Only the income has generated from the oil most likely has been in both or has been invested in some infrastructure and public services, but not talking about long-term economic sustainability. There's not much has been really done. So if the oil had run out now, what would happen? Most likely the countries here would face an economic crisis and you would have really negative consequences in many aspects. It is happening now. It's happening now, but at the low scale. And we will look at this in the last slide. We have a political say, which is the Dutch disease. Dutch disease. Dutch disease, this is what I just was talking about. It's we find people become, or countries become dependent on oil and revenue coming from oil and not able to invest. What exactly happened in the United States and Canada and Australia long ago, we are able to develop and invest. USA, Canada, Australia, and many countries be able to invest. They have a model, that kind of development model led by them, by oil now. But this is not the situation in the Gulf. What's happened in the Gulf, the result of development based on oil, we have development. You see, when you go up speed, high, development at the high speed, but this is depends on the oil exports. But then suddenly we have a decline in economic growth because of the reliance on oil. We have nowadays what's happening for the past few years, since 2015, 2014 onward, we have a decline in economic growth, and this is being witnessed very well in GCC countries. Saudi Arabia is in debt. Almost every country has been in debt for the past few years and are not able to survive in the same way we had before 2014. Now, what is a Dutch disease? A Dutch disease here, it has been, this is phenomenon. We call it a Dutch disease, that oil did not stop in its relation with the economic side, but rather to its relation with political development, as some political scientists have revealed how the abundance of oil affects the trends of democracy, meaning the dependency on oil somehow have some negative impact on the democracy and political development. You don't have no political parties, not much political competition, election limited in some of the countries to small number of candidates in the legislative councils and municipal councils. Some countries, such as in Saudi Arabia, no elections. It's a difficult situation. We have confiscation somehow in human rights. And so political development has not witnessed much because of people depends much on the income generated from oil and the rich life, and they don't care much, no attention about the political development. This is in this slide, I'm going to send it to you, slide 7. It's only to explain what exactly meant by the Dutch disease as an economic term. It's an economic term for the negative consequences that can arise from a spike in the value of nation's currency. Suddenly you become rich, and then the primary associated here with the new discovery and exploitations of valuable natural such as oil, and unexpected unexpected repercussions that such a discovery can have on the overall economy of the nation. So that happens in Netherlands in 1959, and the consequences was harsh somehow. This is just an example of the term of Dutch disease. Countries become rich suddenly and cannot sustain this and cannot use it in the right way. So look at this here. The countries of the Gulf Cooperation Council have witnessed what have three booms in oil in 1970s, 1980s, 1970s, and 1980s, and um, 2012. We have the price of oil was skyrocketing. You know how much is the barrel of oil today? I mean, you can ask, you can look, you can search. How much is the barrel of oil today? The barrel of oil today is costing almost 40 US dollar. But in 2012, almost 80 years ago, 9 years, 10 years ago, it reached more than 100 US dollar. You talk about surge high of the price of oil. Too much money was generated, surplus, financial surplus as a result of the rise of oil price. That was a record high, a level high. So then if you have such amount of money and such high income coming to you, what would you do? Would you invest? Would you save? Saving is not the best way. If you talked about political economy, you ask economists, they would say most likely investment could be the best way, especially because you cannot depend on a natural resource forever. So this kind of surplus of income generated a higher level of health, education, income. The income of the people was multiplied almost like 10 years ago, multiple. Like if you have $2,000 a month, that most likely was becoming like $3,000 and $4,000 a month as an income. So that was the high level. Now, what happens in 2019, 2020, this year, the oil price became 30 US dollars. If you have the budget was made at 70 US dollar that you make in your budget, would say that in one of the countries, the budget is 150 US dollar. And this is based on an oil price that the oil price of the barrel is 70 US dollar. But now we have it at 35. So it means we have deficit, 50% deficit. Usually that is the situation for the past 5 years. Since 2040, we have deficits in budgets. And you know what deficit? We can, if you don't know, you can ask me, you can explain it more in the question time. We do have deficits in budget, meaning the country becomes in debt. In debt for whom? They lend money from banks, they lend money from outside the country. Now almost 60% of the debt came from outside the GCC. Yes, countries are rich, but for the past 6 years, almost every country in the Gulf become in debt. You could see that everybody is rich. Is not really. This is not the fact anymore. It's not a fact anymore. The country is in debt of almost like half of its budget on an annual basis. So, and if you look at this and calculate it based on accumulation of debts, that's a huge amount of money. So how this could be reflected now, the oil sector has been transforming the countries for the past many years, but today we have a different situation. Do we have democracy or non-democracy? This is, I'm going to come back, and now coming back to the same point I mentioned at the beginning. Is it kind of, what kind of democracy we have? Is it the same like in many European countries? Do we have to copy and paste the same political system we have in other countries? No. In political science and political life, we believe that every country have a unique political system. Yes, we do study the political system, and we have some specific system, but again, like even within those systems we depend upon to explain things for students. The fact is every country is unique. Even the term democracy is not the same from one country to another. It's not the same exactly. Is democracy election? Is it democracy? Is it election? Not exactly election. Election is only one point, one segment. What about the human rights? What about the freedom of expression? Now we have different levels. It depends. Some countries, such as in Oman, for example, people have more freedom of expressions and more human rights than in some other countries. So it depends on each country. But again, like we do have lots of achievements have been done for the past 5 decades in terms of political developments and political dynamics, but it's not the same level people want to have. People would like to achieve more. I'll give you an example. Elections. Elections. Some of the countries, in Oman, we have elections. In Bahrain, some elections. In Kuwait, they have elections. But again, this is something new, was only for the past 30 years. 30 years ago, there was no election at all, almost. There were no elections. Of talking about the council. The head of a state is a monarchy, and a monarchy is not bad as some people can think of. The king, and we had this same thing in Spain, in Belgium, United Kingdom. Now the GCC countries have monarchy, but the monarchy, it depends. We have constitutional monarchy, absolute monarchy, both. And even we have some kind of mix between. Now, almost every system in the Gulf is a absolute monarchy, not a constitutional monarchy like in the UK. But if you ask the people, you'll find that everybody is almost happy with the situation. Everybody is almost happy with this monarchy, and because what I mentioned before, the development of life in many aspects, and people can work and have income and stability and security, which is people are happy with. So, but it's still like people demanding more space of human rights, freedom of expressions, and elections to empower young people, empower women. Women, by the way, women in GCC countries have rights, same like in many countries in the world, even more. For example, in Oman, public employees, you cannot imagine this, 51% of public employees are female. So it's one of the highest in the world. Female have been empowered, have been working in public office, female ministers, ambassadors in very high ranks. So many achievements have been done, but it's not the same like people are still demanding more and more. It's coming, I think. But what we have today is, we do have a crisis today. It is, in fact. Some people call it difficulties. But what kind of a crisis we have? The crisis we have today because of many factors. One is the pandemic, COVID-19, coronavirus. And this has an influence not only in Gulf, this have the influence on every single country in the world, including every country. What I mean, this have the influence in terms of economy, employment, health, psychology. Every country have been affected, including the Gulf. But the Gulf specifically have been affected and influenced in a negative way because of drop of oil price. When I mentioned before, just a few minutes ago, oil price went below 30 US dollar for the barrel at April, March this year. Now it's about 40 something US dollar for the barrel, which is it's really nothing for, because of the budget depends much on the high price of oil, like 70 80 US dollar. But even now they have been taking some kind of economic measures, but it's not responding much to the crisis. This is not in one country, but this is almost in every country in the Gulf who depends on oil. Because of the drop in oil price, they have to cut the budget of 20% or 30% even. A third factor, which is the Yemen. Yemen is a Gulf country. It is a Gulf, but it's not in GCC. There was a discussion years ago that Yemen should be included in GCC, but because of the economic situation in Yemen and because of the conflict, that the GCC countries, some of them objected and say, well, Yemen is not ready. It's not ready that time to be in GCC because of the economy and because of the conflicts from time to time. So this kind of a crisis and points the reason the question is, what is the future of the Gulf? What is the future, taking into consideration the oil price, the conflicts, not even the Yemen conflict, but the way we have a conflict today in a we'll call Qatar crisis. Qatar crisis. It's between Qatar has been besieged, blocked by Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and UAE. Same GCC countries, the three of them, UAE, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia blocked, besieged Qatar. We will talk about this in one lecture. So what is the future? It's a bit vague. Is it vague? What do you think? It's not easy to have the answer for this, but the future is not easy for the region. I mentioned just like here, I would like to highlight more the coronavirus, COVID-19, and how it has influenced the Gulf countries. Gulf countries do depends much on oil, yes, but for the past 1 or 2 decades, some countries have shifted in investment. UAE invested much in foreign investment, private sector, foreign investment, private sector, airlines. We have many airlines such as in United Arab Emirates, in Qatar, and even Saudi Arabia, and even Bahrain, same thing, trying to compete to become, but the UAE have its own airlines, which has been really competing at the international level. And even Qatar Airways, for example, it's one of the best and achieved excellent and high quality at the international level. What happened with the pandemic? With the pandemic, we have lost in terms of these airlines are not able to meet the spending and the expenses because people are not traveling. And you know the whole story and situation with the pandemic. So unlike commercial company, I think we have seen in the UK, Jet2, I think it's called, one of the companies in the UK, announced bankruptcy. They could not survive. Many companies in the world have applied for bankruptcy because of the pandemic. But in the Gulf, we have seen those companies like Emirates and Qatar, they have been financed and supported by the state itself to stand and to stay working. But the drop, I mentioned just in much details now, that the drop in oil price had affected everything. We have witnessed, there was something in March and in April this year between Saudi Arabia and Russia, Riyadh and Moscow, the confrontation about the oil, almost like kind of a fight between them over the oil. So Saudi Arabia was producing and pumping a huge amount of the oil, even though there was not needed. And that made the price go down. Now, this was one of the things, the pandemic affect the consumption. The pandemic, which is the coronavirus, affect the consumption. We have a low consumption of the oil and the decline. This is becoming like having decline in consumption in general at the international level of oil. This affects the income of these countries. Now, what is the result of all this thing? The result could be the austerity measures. They recall government austerity. I don't know if you know what austerity is. I can explain it. Austerity policies. Austerity meaning that they cut the budget, in having tax and extra tax, management of financial aspects. So we have a whole review of the process of the economy and economic situation to be able to meet such kind of decline in oil price. And they cannot even meet this. It is a long way. Every country has been in debt. The last slide, then we can go for discussion, is what happened with all the situation. The Gulf today needs, what is needed is good governance. Without a good governance, and this is if you study administration and management, and if you study law and politics, in all these areas, most likely you're going to have to study good governance. Governance is important. How can we manage? How we can manage the life? Managing the life, the political economy. Managing the life is not something simple. You have to inspire people. You have to attract professionals who can work much in trying to manage the situation in the best way, because if you don't have the income, how can you survive? If there's no revenue, countries such as the Soviet Union in 1990 collapsed. What was a major power in the world collapsed because of the financial difficulties. In 28, so 2008, we witnessed with the financial crisis in the world, where we have Greece, Portugal, and Spain. They were on the verge of collapse, almost to be bankrupted without the money and the support from the European Union. So what's happening today? If there's no way that countries can think about the best investment, best way to manage the situation, I think a crisis is coming. Yes, the oil price is going up, it's increasing, it's getting better. We have some kind of development, but it's not to the level of it's needed. Like where we say that minimum could be 50. Minimum is 50 US dollar for the oil, for the oil, barrel oil, to be able to meet the minimum standard of revenue. If it becomes below 50 US dollar, it's going to be difficult to meet the demands of the community and the people. So what would happen if this situation goes on? We have the austerity measures, we have the impact on the society, we have unemployment. We have witnessed in 2011, lots of changes in the Middle East, political transformations, and many countries such as in Egypt, in Tunisia, in Libya, in Yemen. One of the reasons was the economic situation, not only because of the political situation, but what if this situation goes on in the Gulf? What would happen? This is a question mark for everybody. And I think politicians have been working hard to find ways to manage in the whole situation. Thank you very much. And then we can now open the floor for discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor, for this enlightening speech and presentation. Dear participants, if you have a question, you can unmute yourself and ask your questions, or you can deliberate through Q&A section, where you can find at the bottom of the screen. Professor, before our participants,
Yes.
There's a question which is asked by Shabir Ahmed Kuchay. He wants to know more details about the philosophy of petrodollar.
The petrodollar, I'm not familiar with the economic aspects about this phenomenon much, but I can explain the whole fluctuation of the oil price in the whole area, and this could be much dependent on the consumptions and the production. And so the petrodollar, it's somehow a mechanism have been imposed by the United States, and with the United States have its own oil and have its own budgetary, and it have the impact on the price somehow in the world. And we witnessed this in this year, in 2020, at the beginning of this year, we have the drop of oil price, because we have not only because of the pandemic, but with the United States have produced and lots of oil. And the United States have its own oil production, and this can affect as well the production at the international level. And the cooperation has been somehow between the OPEC countries at the lowest level. So the OPEC countries are not able to defy the position of the United States, will somehow influence the oil price. Now, when you sell the oil at the US dollar, this somehow would enhance the United States currency and give it more boost. We know the fact that every currency in the world would have the assets to support it. When the United States can only print the US dollar, with no gold, with no reserve, and it's a difficult situation where United States are able to abuse other countries by using its flexi muscles and can affect really the whole economic and political structure in many other countries. So the petrodollar and that kind of connotation, this kind of link, it has been imposed much by the United States and has been there for a long time. But again, like it depends much on the exporting countries of the oil. Is it going to be easy for them? As we understand the facts such as Saudi Arabia and the Gulf countries have been influenced by the United States and they cannot do much decisions. I know that Saudi Arabia has been pumping oil in the market last year and this year, which is beyond the expectations. And this kind of drowned the whole world of the oil, meaning that that would influence the oil price, Now, did this happen with coordination with the United States, or was that a decision was taken by the Saudi Arabia? Lots of things happening, especially with the influence of United States on the Gulf countries, and every single country in the Gulf have its own relationship with the United States and the influence. We have witnessed this. Now, okay, taken much of this, but again, like it's a policy at the international level have to be stopped and dropped with this have to be taken as a decision by the OPEC, the exporting country of oil. They can take a decision if they would like to stay in this situation, or they can, because if they stay in this situation, the oil price will be always lower than it's supposed to be.
Hello, sir.
Yes, hello.
My name is Abhiruchi Chaudhary. I'm from India. So my question to you is, sir, can you explain more about the Russia's conflict with Saudi Arabia, which you mentioned in the previous of your slides, which led to the increase in oil prices?
Yeah, we have witnessed this, and you see the pandemic of coronavirus came and affected and influenced the whole dynamics of the economic situation in the world. So the consumption of oil becomes less than before. So consumption of oil, in order to meet the requirements of the international community and the consumption of oil, we have to have a management by many organizations at the international level, such as OPEC, and our countries who are outside OPEC, in order to manage the production of oil. Now, if you have in the market much oil, which is not needed, it's like, the give and take. It's like any other commodity. You have too much of the commodity in the market, but no consumption. How this would influence the price? This would influence in a negative way. So Saudi Arabia and Russia was trying to producing much of the oil. They have no consensus. They have no agreements. They just wanted to bring more of the oil to the market. Saudi Arabia have the cost of oil in Saudi Arabia is, talk about the cost of digging down and trying to refine it, is one of the lowest in the world. So for them, producing more oil does not affect much the stability of the money and the income, but they think it's a mismanagement, yes, but they think producing more oil can compensate the loss of the price, because the barrel of oil was $70 becomes $30, thinking that if we can produce more, this will kind of compensate the loss. But the fact, no, that producing more of the oil, the price went down and down. And so the mismanagement and lack of coordination and this kind of a war between, some scholars call it a war between Russia and Saudi Arabia in terms of a production of more oil without coordination at the expense of other countries in the Middle East and in the world who export oil. So a lack of coordination, such as what happened between those two countries, led to even the inflation of the price, which like oil price went below $30 for the first time for like many years. But eventually they went and eventually there was an agreement, and now they reduce the oil production. The agreement make it looks better, and oil price went up $40 and even more than $40.
Hello, Professor. May I ask a question?
Hello, Professor.
Hello, can you speak up?
Hello.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
Yes, I'm Safet Öztürk. I'm from Turkey. And first of all, thank you for the great talk. And thanks to you, I learned many things about the Gulf countries and Gulf region. And I have two questions. First of all, could you talk about a little bit today's relationship between the Republic of Turkey and the Gulf countries? And how do you see this relationship in the long term? I mean, positively or negatively in the long term? The second question, second question is that, can Republic of Turkey be a modern example for the Gulf countries in the context of the democratic experience? What do you think about this matter? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Where are you from? Which country?
Republic of Turkey. Turkey.
Thank you. This question is amazing. Like, I mean, I like the questions you ask here. Many people don't know much about the relationship between Turkey and the Gulf countries, except for Qatar. For the past, you see, if you look at Qatar and Turkey have one of the best political and economic relationship, especially since 2017, since the Saudi Arabia and other blockading countries imposed sanctions on Qatar. Believe me, without Turkey presence in Qatar, Qatar would be now occupied by Saudi Arabia and Egypt and UAE. Now, Turkey and Qatar is one of the best and one of the long relationship, because Turkey and Qatar, that you cannot say we have one package that GCC countries and Turkey is not the same. If you talk Qatar and Turkey, it's the best example. Cooperation in terms of economy, culture, faith, interactions, educations, security. And we have a security base, Turkish security base in Qatar. Now, if you look at Turkey and UAE and Saudi Arabia and Bahrain, it's the opposite completely. It's like the region has been divided. This region has been divided somehow into three main camps. This could make it easier for you to understand the point. The whole Middle East has been divided now into three main camps. One, it's led by Iran. The second, it's led by Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates and Egypt. Now with Israel with them, the normalization countries. And the third is led by Turkey. So Turkey influence, one, Iranian influence, two, Saudi Arabia is the third. So Saudi Arabia have the influence on Bahrain and United Arab Emirates. In fact, it's a bit complicated between UAE and Saudi Arabia. It's really complicated, and who's leading who exactly. But if you look at Oman and Kuwait have somehow a smooth and nice relationship with everybody. Oman and Kuwait have been left as channels of communications. They have very good relationship with Turkey. They kind of exchange investments and political ties. We don't know much about the security aspects between the two sides, but I think that's why we need to spend more in research. If you would like to study, you would like to do more on the Gulf studies, we can study the Gulf studies and Turkey and how the situation and how the relationship between them, but we have to be careful. Not every country have the same situation. Let's say one, Qatar is an ally with Turkey. Two, Oman and Kuwait have very nice relationship with Turkey and smooth and beautiful. Three, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Bahrain consider themselves to be the opponent of Turkey, right? But if you look for the long term, as you have mentioned, for the long term, I think Turkey has gone a long way of democracy. Turkey was and still one of the strongest countries in the whole region, and it's considered to be the best in many aspects in economy development, in education, in health, in military. But this, came over many years. I mean, Turkey was a state, we should look at the Ottoman Empire, which existed for more than like 4 centuries, almost 5 centuries. It was expanded to the Middle East and many other countries because of the political enclave and political ideology and political way of dealing with situation management, as we have mentioned before, managing. This is political governance. Now Turkey is coming back as one of the best economies, even though we know the impact and the influence by the Western societies on Turkey and the loss of the lira, it's losing its value. But the economy is doing very well. And military aspects, Turkey is the second strongest country in the NATO. Democracy in Turkey is one of the best democracies in the world. We have transparency, elections, opponent, they can say, they can speak loud, the freedom of expression. This could be one of the best examples to, as a Muslim country, and as a country has been there for thousands of years. I think this could be a role model for many countries in the Middle East, not only for the Gulf.
Hello.
Thank you so much, Professor. Thank you so much.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, sir.
Okay, go on.
Am I audible?
Is it Sayed?
Hello. Am I audible?
Yes, Sayed.
Yes. Thanks. Yes. Am I audible? First of all, sir, good evening. I want to ask a question. There reports and prediction that the oil shrinking, particularly in Saudi Arabia, like till 250 or 49, there will be no oil in Saudi Arabia to
sound. I cannot hear you well.
And how they are going sector they are investing.
And the sound goes on and off. I cannot hear you well. The sound.
Hello.
So can we take another question if you don't mind, because I cannot hear you well.
Hello, can I ask
Batul?
a question, please? Yes.
Batul?
Yes, do you hear me?
Go on. Yes. Can you speak up a little?
My sound clear?
Can I go?
Yes,
Okay.
Batul.
Well, thank you very much for this interesting course. I have a question about the, if you may call it, the Nexus COVID geopolitical security situation in the Gulf countries, like how the pre-COVID security situation has had an impact on how the region was affected by the COVID, and vice versa, how the COVID impact may have an impact on the security situation, like how the security situation absorbed the COVID-19 before and after. I don't know if my question is.
Thank you, Batul.
Thank you so much.
The security situation has been somehow in sensitive situation for the past decade, and since 2011 we have the changes in the Middle East, and with these changes in the Middle East, political changes, we have some influence, especially in Yemen. Even before Yemen, we have the Iraq-Iran war in 1980s, and that have influence on GCC and the whole region. We have lots of developments for the past few years, especially in Yemen, where Saudi Arabia have been involved heavily in Yemen and have influence in Yemen. Iran, it's a Gulf country. Iran have the influence on Houthis in Yemen as well. So we have a proxy war in Yemen between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and even Russia and the United States somehow involved. This has been there for the past few years before the pandemic. This have the influence on the security situation and the economic situation, where the Saudis and United Arab Emirates have spent too much money, billions of US dollars in this war with they could not generate anything, no benefit out of it. So now with the pandemic, the security situation becomes even more clear to everybody that it's more have been under the assessment of everybody in the whole region that what should be done to be able to fortify the economic, so the security situations. I have written one of the articles on the collective security in the Gulf. Collective security in the Gulf. What I mean by this, it's the need for the Gulf countries to work together. That's including the 9 countries, 9, GCC, Iran, Iraq, and Yemen. Without able to work together, it's not going to be easy for them to survive. We have the threat from terrorism because we have Daesh, meaning ISIS, somehow moved to some areas and have the influence on some people in the Gulf as well. Not even this, you talk about security, economic security. You talk about many aspects of security, human security. So if you would like to talk about the wider level, that what is needed in the Gulf is collective security, where all countries can work together under the GCC umbrella or a new body who can support the stability and security. Yes, in Oman, for example, and in Kuwait, it's one of the best. Oman is ranked one of the best in the world in terms of peace and security. Same thing goes somehow for Kuwait. But the rest of the countries in the Gulf, they have been exposed for many years for the risks for many aspects in terms of like we have the conflicts surrounding the whole Gulf areas.
Thank you very much.
Shall we take messages?
Doctor, can I mention something?
Okay, Abdurrahman.
Yeah, I am from Somalia, doctor.
Hello, Abdurrahman.
Yeah, you hear me well, sir?
Yes, go on.
I wanted to ask you a few questions about the topic that you are talking about. Okay, could we say democracy in Middle East is like the way that they are managing the rule that they are managing like what they want because of they don't want to go, can I call the way, the freedom of speech, the citizenship, free and fair election. They are not tolerating their citizens. Can we say that democracy on the Middle East is not good as much as the rest of the world? That's it.
Yes. Abdurrahman, thank you. It's a good question. Thank you. Yes, definitely. Democracy in the Middle East it's not up to the level. Now, you don't have even sometimes the minimum standard. When you talk about level of expression, freedom of expression, human rights, elections, empowerment of young people and women is not the same like other countries in the world. This is what I said, like we have development, but this development has not reached the standard level which has been requested by the communities. So the evaluation is Middle Eastern countries, and especially in the Gulf, have been ranked behind in terms of freedom of expressions and human rights somehow. But we cannot say, Abdurrahman, we cannot say this is the situation specifically in every single country. It depends from one country to another. You have variation. We don't have variations. There could be sometimes you have more freedom of expressions than other countries. But again, what is needed? It is what you have mentioned. Democracy, it's about the people who can vote, they can elect, they can choose. It's about the choice of people. All people can choose? No, not in many countries. People cannot even choose their own leaders. So we're still behind. Thank you, Abdurrahman.
Doctor, can I mention something about Oman?
Jilan?
Yes.
Yes, go on.
Oman is a neutral country. It's also
Can you speak
it
up,
has
Jilan? Where are you from?
a good relationship with Israel. And you know that before Qaboos did, Netanyahu visited Oman.
Yes, what the question is?
No, just mention about that comment about Oman, because you mentioned Oman has a good relationship with Turkey. Just I mentioned also with Israel.
Yes, yes. Okay. Where are you from, Jilan?
From Jordan.
From Jordan, yes. You see, you know that normalization has been for the past few weeks. We have UAE, Bahrain, and Sudan. And Trump have mentioned this clearly that he's going to go on and on. And if he's re-elected, fortunately, alhamdulillah, he's not elected. Now, otherwise, we're going to witness more of normalizations with Israel in the Gulf. And I know we have some informations, but it's not accurate that some other countries in the Gulf and in the Middle East to have normalization with Israel. In fact, almost all GCC countries have relation with Israel indirectly, but it's not official, like unofficial. It's kind of unofficial, meaning how can Bahrain and UAE have kind of normalization suddenly? No, it wasn't not sudden. It was not a sudden. It was coming over the past few years. They have links, contacts, but it was under the table. Now it becomes clear and obvious. Now we don't have like every country in GCC and almost having a relationship with Israel, which is indirect. People in Oman are not happy. We have the hashtag. You know that we have a hashtag in Oman. People who refuse, and even the Mufti of Oman, Sheikh Al Khalili, have gone and talk about this, express his way, and he's the second person respected in the country after the Sultan. He said very well that we are against normalization with Israel. People, the same thing in Oman. It's a unique country. In fact, it is really a unique country somehow. You have people are calm, communication with everybody. Kind of, we have what we call that the wisdom of expression. People don't take decision easily. They have to think about them. Sultan Qaboos, rahmatullah Ali, was one of the person who worked for 50 years in building Oman, 50 years. People loved him so much because he built the country from nothing. And people, if you can live and see the situation in Oman, it's really calm and nice and peaceful and does not have hostility. This is the way they call it, no hostility with any country in the world.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jilan.
Professor, it's ORSAM team. If you would like to, we have also many questions in the Q&A section. So you can find the questions at the bottom of the screen, Q&A section. If you click on it.
Just a second.
Okay.
So the question, I have many questions here. So
yes,
I don't know which one to select.
For example, as a minute earlier, Said Mohammed Ahsan couldn't ask his questions because of the poor internet connection. And he said that there are some predictions regarding the oil fields in Saudi Arabia, that it will go away by 2050. There isn't actual data regarding the prediction. How do these claims, particularly when Arabs are investing in other sectors, and how it impacts the regional geopolitics?
Okay, the fact is oil is not going to run for life, and nobody knows exactly how long it's going to last. And this is not only the point. We have consumption in oil, and this can run. The oil itself can run out, but this is not the point. We have now alternatives in many countries. The fossil fuel, which is happening, is coming now. To generate electricity now, you don't depend much on oil like before. Oil dependency is less and less. You have many millions and have billions of cars in the world. You have electricity. Electricity can be generated by using the sun, the waves, and the wind, and the nuclear capabilities. So dependency on oil is not the future. It's not the future. Gas could be one of the best for now. This is why Qatar, Turkey, Ukraine, Russia, sorry, they depends much on oil now because, on gas. Gas is somehow for the next 1 or 2 decades could be leading, giving a chance to any country to succeed in economy. Oil consumption is still high, but it's not like before. And not every country have the same. Saudi Arabia have one of the highest reserve in the world. It is one of the highest. So whatever you say, like this is why do we have the extra production? Like somebody says, Saudi Arabia is laid down on a lake of oil beneath the Saudi Arabia. So it's not easy to say that, well, it's going to run out, it's going to finish. No, this is not really the fact. Oil, it's going to be there for a long time. But again, what can make the difference in the future is the alternative. What else we can use? Do we depend on oil for life forever? No. We can take another 10 minutes, maybe another 10 minutes. We can take another question now. Doctor, you can read that for me, Doctor.
Yes, of course.
Is it Dr. Ahmed?
Yeah, it's Ahmed, but not the doctor.
That's okay.
I'm just working in ORSAM. Okay. The another questions, our participants did not specify his or her name. The question, what's your opinion regarding to Qatar-Iran gas deal? How's this strategic cooperation give impact to Arab region?
Qatar has been, Iran has been working with some countries in the Gulf. It cannot export its own commodities, either whether gas or oil, easily because of the restrictions imposed by the United States and the international community. So Qatar is using a third country. Sorry, I'm mixing. Iran is using a third country. Now Iran is working with Oman, with Qatar, with UAE, even though UAE, United Arab Emirates, is against Iran in terms of politics. But most of the investment in Dubai and Abu Dhabi came from Iran. Most of the investment, billions and billions of dollars invested in Dubai, Iranian money. It's Iranian money. Iran would like to sell its own products to the outside world, but they cannot do so. They send it to a third country. This could be same, like it's not only Qatar, could be UAE, Oman, and Qatar. And there's no harm in this. There's no harm. United States knows about it. The international community know about this. That going around the whole sanctions on Iran. But I think even with coming within the next few months, with the United States, a new administration led by Biden, we might witness some kind of a changes. European community is not imposing the sanctions on Iran because they have the same, I'm talking about the same like United States, as we have the nuclear deal, which was made in 2015. But I think I'm expecting that a new deal would come with the United States, would go back to the nuclear deal with Iran in the near future. This would give it more ability to interact with the international community under specific conditions, But again, even now, some countries are still dealing with Iran in terms of economy and finance, but this is not about the political life, separating politics from economy.
Okay, thank you. Another question, I don't know, it's related to our this lecture, but Sabir Ahmed Kucay asks that how the normalization process with Israel affect the geopolitics of GCC?
Affect the job?
Affect the geopolitics of GCC.
Oh, it's very much, this very much would affect the geopolitics, and the normalization would have an impact on those countries who have influence on their own people. Not even this, if you look at now normalization, UAE and Bahrain, Saudi Arabia have some kind of contact and other countries with Israel. But this, I was talking to one of the experts and one of my colleagues, an expert in Gulf studies, and a few days ago we had a radio interview. He was saying, like, you know, even that Oman and other countries in GCC will not or may not normalize with Israel, but they will be influenced. How are they going to be influenced? Because when you talk about the Israeli production, I mean, yesterday only we have seen on social media so many Israeli production vegetables and fruits coming to the market in Dubai and many cities in United Arab Emirates. And when you talk about the open market, GCC have an open market. So the products coming from Israel to one country in GCC, it's an open market that's going to be available to everybody living in GCC, whether going to be citizens or expats. This is in terms of economy. So the GCC countries will be an open market for the Israeli products. This is one. Two, in terms of politics, countries who are supporting the Palestinians, they would think many times about, you know, the Israeli side and, you know, why and when and how they will support the Palestinians in terms of what exactly, because they would have to think about their own contact and allies with the Israelis. You know, United Arab Emirates now, they have strong allies, strong contact with the Israeli side under the new normalization pact. So they might not be able to support the Palestinians in the United Nations or the international level. So the Palestinians losing the political support from those countries in the Gulf and in the Middle East who used to support the Palestinians. The third point is about military security. Gulf is very important area. The existence of the Israeli military camp, the Israelis could have military camps in the Gulf or maybe not. If they're not going to have their own military camps, they would use military camps of host countries or United States military camps in the Gulf. And this would have influence on the Iranian side. So the Iranian side would have to think many times before they can hit the Israelis. So they're kind of influence in terms of security. Now, if they're going to be stationed somehow in some areas in United Arab Emirates, they would overlook somehow the Hormuz Strait, which Hormuz Strait overlook 40% of the world oil. If you look at the Red Sea from the other side, now if this is true on Sumatra, that UAE and Israel can have military base, or maybe the Israelis can have, and they can use the military base in Sumatra, which is UAE. That is a kind of a crazy idea. You know, they would look the Red Sea, and the Red Sea and Bab el-Mandeb, very strategic location. And this is why, if you look at Yemen is very strategic location, and the fight has been there for a long time. Saudis and UAE existence in Yemen would give a chance for the Israelis somehow to overlook the Red Sea and Bab el-Mandeb. And shall we take the last question?
Yes, Professor. The last question is coming from Mohammed Fuad Tingai, and asks that basically whether oil is a grace or a curse for GCC.
Better oil is?
The oil, is it a grace or a curse for GCC?
Well, now for the short term, it's a grace for the GCC. For the short term, you could see. I mean, I've been to many countries many countries, and I could see in GCC, it's one of the most beautiful infrastructure, the buildings, the modern life. Believe me, this is the situation. Maybe some of you have been to the GCC countries and you have seen the buildings, the malls, the infrastructures, the hospitals, universities. It's amazingly low. It's what is because it's new. and because the money invested. So it's a grace for the short term that depending much on the oil, money generated from oil to invest in the country, invest in education, in public service, in everything. For the long term, it could be a dam for some countries if they don't use this a chance. For the long term, oil is not gonna last forever. For the long term, oil will collapse. Countries and people would generate other sources. And this would have a negative influence on GCC countries if they don't have a plan. Plan A is oil. What's plan B? This is why we will look at the good governance. How can we manage if you have an extra money? You remember the story of Prophet Prophet Yusuf in Egypt at the time, thousands of years ago, where the king of Egypt wanted to manage that. You see, now that kind of the expectation. They have the money and the wealth and they have the wheat. 7 years of collecting the wheat, 7 years saving the wheat, and then because the 7 years after that they have a drought. There was no rain, no plants, no wheat. So what we have saved in the past years, we could use in the future. Saving, investment, that is important. Now, some of the countries have invested somehow in the infrastructure, invested in education, but only for the short term. What is the long-term investment? What is the long-term? Long-term investment would be industry, farming, could be tourism, education, technology. But this is not happening much. It's not really much. I mean, I'll give you an example. Singapore was nothing 50 years ago. Same, like in the Gulf, it was almost nothing. But Singapore now, it's one of the best, one of the strongest economies in the world. Singapore have made life from nothing. They manufacture water. It becomes a hub for people, for investment, logistics and transportations, banking sector. This kind of the investment, technology as well, chip technology. So if you would like now for the Gulf countries, I think for the long term, they have to think from now. Now it's a difficult time, but it's going to be more difficult after 10 and 20 years. It's going to be really tough if do not think in a positive way about long-term investment. In Saudi Arabia, they have plan called 2030. Qatar have a 2030. Oman have 2020 and now having 2040. They call it vision for investment, diversification of investment. But is it going to be working? Not easy. We have failed many times in terms of economic recovery. I'm not sure if this is going to be success in the future. I'm not really sure. All right. I would like to thank you for listening. And if you have any question, you can coordinate with Dr. Ahmed. Maybe you can have my email or whatever kind of communication. You can send me the question anytime. You can be in touch with me. It is fine for me.